Much. So hi, I'm Karen, and this is an interesting talk about what I learned from losing my job. I think we were having a conversation when I first met Ashik, and I was talking about this experience, and he's like, that sounds really interesting, you should do a talk on it. I was like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do a talk on it, I'm still pretty angry. And so I'm hoping I've moved past the angry part, and I thought that it would be a really good experience to put a talk together so that maybe I could actually process it and be like, okay, actually, everything that happens in life, you can learn something from. So how can I turn this into a learning experience and kind of get over the angry? So if you catch me being angry, just call me on it. It's okay. I'm trying to get over it. So I'm going to start with a question. And now my buttons aren't working because I said I didn't need a clicker. I'll do it that way. So, show of hands, who's been part of a great team? Oof, this is an awesome room. Who is part of that great team today? Okay, less people. Cool. Hold on to that, because I'm going to come back to that. But the reason I ask this question is that if I have to really think about what leadership means, it's that. Your job is to create that great team. And so this is kind of my story of how I did that, and then how I couldn't protect it. And there were some things that were out of my control that meant I couldn't protect that team, but in that kind of learned some lessons as well. And so I'm going to start with kind of where did it begin. So when I joined this team, they had been without a leader for more than 6 months. It was a small team. I think when I joined, we were 11 people. About half of them had only been there about 3 to 4 months, so it was also about half of it was a new team. And they happened to work on a piece of the product that the rest of the company hated. Anyone worked in a company where there's that piece of the product that everyone's like, oh, frick, that team. The team that does the really annoying product and messes up with all our good work. That was literally who this team was. And I think it actually made grounds for a really good team, because as a result, anybody who wasn't super nice had already left this team. So the only people who were left in this team were the super nice people who would actually put up with that. So I had really good grounds to work with a group of really, really nice people. But it was a team that were broken because they literally, every single thing they did, quite often, in fact, the last 6 months, everything they'd worked on had been pulled from the product because actually somebody had blocked their work. And so they felt like they had delivered zero value. And then the person who'd been stepping in and filling the sort of leadership role, who had no experience doing that but did a valiant effort, was also about to go on maternity leave for a year. So there was a lot of transition in the team. So I joined. They were all very excited about that, finally had a leader. So when you have that, where do you start, right? And so I started with what I believe is the most important leadership meeting that you can have as a leader. Anyone want to guess what it is? I don't drink beer, so no. Actually, I do like having drinks with my team, but this is actually even more important than that. One-on-ones, absolutely. So I believe it is the most important thing you can do is have one-on-one meetings. Those are the meetings where you get to understand who are the people on your team, what is their makeup, what are their hopes, what are their dreams, what are they afraid about, what are they excited about. It's where they get to learn all those things about you. If you think, and we talk about leadership versus management, a lot of people are like, well, the role of a leader is to be a coach. When is the best time to do coaching? Actually, one-on-one conversations are the best time to do coaching. And so something that, since I've started to have this belief, and it's been for a few years, I've had a couple of roles as like a dev manager or something like that. I've started to notice one-on-ones I have with my managers and how those turn out. And I haven't actually had that many good managers in my life. I've had a few, but I don't currently have a one-on-one with my manager. I've only been there a month and a half. I've never had a one-on-one with him. I've been in another job where I had a one-on-one scheduled with my manager, and every single week without fail, he would move it 5 minutes before the one-on-one happened. That kind of said to me, I've got more important stuff to do than talk to you. So if you are going to have one-on-ones with your team, the most important thing you can do is honor that and make them feel valued, and that time is time you're investing in them. And if you do nothing else in your job, I think you'll be an awesome leader. So that is really I think, does anyone read Rands in Repose? He wrote a recent article on one-on-ones. Some really, really good advice in there. I don't have a link, but I'm pretty sure you can all Google. So I started doing that. I had one-on-ones with kind of everybody in the team and started to understand. This is where I understood just how broken the team was. And then the next thing was, you need to believe that your team is capable of greatness. This was particularly important for a team that had been beaten down and felt like they could do no good. But I think any team wants to be awesome. And they're only going to believe it themselves if you believe it first. And so to me, part of being a leader is telling your team you know that they can be awesome. You know that they can be even better than they can imagine that they can be. And you start painting that picture. So this was the team who worked on the product that everybody hated. And in talking and having conversations and seeing what was possible, I came up with a plan of what we were going to do. And it was literally how this team was going to fundamentally change the face of the business. And I believed it. I could actually say to them, this is what we're going to do and this is how. And we're going to fundamentally change the place of this business. And they started to believe it. They were like, this could be really awesome. We should so do this. And so people need that belief in them before they're going to have that belief in themselves. And once they believe it, they are actually unstoppable. But you don't get there without having the belief first. The next one, I've been teaching this for a long time because also in my work as an agile coach, I often get told trust needs to be earned. No, 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 no. If that's your starting point, you're never going to have trust. And everything I know about teams is that good teams have trust. And so as a leader, your job is to give it and give it and give it again. And when they break it, you give some more. Because if you start from the position of they have to earn it, you're never going to get there. And so much more stuff happens once you have trust. Just go there. Just give them the benefit of the doubt and go there. And so I want to share a story from this team, which is a really, really small example of how you can do this. So one of the guys on my team, I'd only been there about 2 months, and he didn't come into the office that day, and we got a text going, oh, he's not really feeling well. And we're like, okay, well, that's cool. The next day he was in hospital with a kidney stone. And then the following day he's like, it's fine, I'll just work from home. And I was like, Juan, really, just take some time. You have a kidney stone. You were in hospital yesterday. Chill. And then eventually he came back to work literally in like less than a week. I was like, are you sure you should be here? And he gave me a sick certificate. And I went, what must I do with this? I've only been in the company for 2 months. I don't know what their policies are. So he said, I don't know. I just assumed I must give it to you. So I checked with HR, and they were like, yeah, we don't really collect them. It's a pretty small company. They don't have a lot of policies. It's really manager's discretion. So I went, excellent. Juan, thanks very much for getting your doctor to write that. You never, ever have to do that again. And by the way, everyone else on the team, I never want to see a sick certificate. I really just don't care. If you take a sick day, I trust that you're sick. Even if you're not really sick, you just don't feel like coming to work, you know what? Stay home. I trust you to make the best call. And all of these policies that we put in place over time, they're actually just policies to say, I don't trust you. So just stop. Just trust them. I worked for myself for 6 years. I never got a sick certificate. You know how freeing that is to go to the doctor and the doctor's like, do you need a sick note? And I was like, no, I'm my own boss. I don't need a sick note. Just stop with that nonsense. Another common piece of leadership advice, be vulnerable. And so, again, I don't want to give you these big phrases and not give you any concrete advice. So here's how I was vulnerable to my team. When some of the stuff started going wrong and I was like, this is not the happy, beautiful place I thought it was, that was really hard for me. And so I was like, woke up one morning, I don't know if it was a Monday or a Tuesday, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't face the world. I just want to crawl back under my duvet and not see anybody because it's just so shit right now. And so I told my team I was taking a mental health day. And I told my boss. And I came back the next day and everyone was like, are you okay? And I'm like, it was pretty shitty, but yeah, I'm better now. And here's the difference. There were other people on my team who I take antidepressants, I have for years, who take the same drugs as me because we had that conversation, who took mental health days, but they thought they had to say they were sick because they didn't know it was okay. And I think there's a difference between saying it's okay for you to take a mental health day and for you to actually do it yourself. And so the amount of trust and the openness that the team would have with me about, actually I'm feeling really shitty and I don't want to talk to people today, was so much more powerful after I'd done this myself. And we could start to have conversations about, some of us suffer from depression, some of us take these things, some of us have days where we don't want to talk to people. How do we deal with that as a team? And those things surface after you're willing to expose that you too as a human have flaws. Some of you who might know, Mark knows me well, I cry like at the drop of a hat. I had many issues for many years about it, and then I got over it. But one of the things I do with I cry in front of them. I'm like, yeah, I'm sad. And it's actually what I figured out recently is it's not when I'm sad, it's when I'm really angry or frustrated that I cry. I've actually cried in front of giving a keynote talk for 400 people, and it was recorded on video. Cried through the whole thing. I shared that with my team, and they were like, that was awesome. It's okay. And when you're vulnerable, they suddenly realize they can be vulnerable too. And so that's what's so important about being vulnerable as a leader. The next one is take part. So I see this a lot with leaders where their teams do a thing and the leader doesn't join in. And I think that it really changes the dynamic if you're just part of that team. So fun little story, my team used to play a game called Space Team. Anyone played Space Team? It's a little phone app game thing. You all connect on the Wi-Fi and you do stuff. And it's actually a really fun game because you have to work together as a team and there's different levels and it gets harder and harder and harder. And they used to play probably once a week at lunchtime. They'd go book a meeting room because it can get quite loud. And they'd be like, okay, we're going to go play Space Team, and they go into the room. I had no idea what this game was. And the one day I was like, can I come play too? What is the Space Team thing? I'm a bit of a gamer. Let's just say I loved the game. It was awesome. You should check it out on your phone. It's really fun. And so I started playing with them occasionally. So it would just become okay, we're going to play Space Team today. Who wants to play? And my favorite story about this was kind of sitting in a room. We'd always book out a meeting room and go, important team meeting. And actually it was just play Space Team. We had a lot of fun doing that. But we'd play it, and then each game takes about 10 to 15 minutes. There's about 10 minutes left before we were going to go back to work. And someone's like, should we play one more round? And they were like, oh, I don't know, we've only got 10 minutes, we go back to work. And somebody pipes up and goes, well, it's not like your boss is going to care. She's sitting right here and playing with you. And that statement said everything about it, which is you can tell people it's okay to play games at work and they might believe you, but they don't really know that it's okay, and you can play the games with them. And actually the value created in that team having a shared experience, which is actually a game where we're trying to solve a thing together and do better together, was the most powerful thing that they could spend an hour doing. And I'm not just saying, I think that it's okay for you to spend your hour lunch break doing that. I think this is so valuable that I'm going to commit my time to doing it too. So that's just one story of how you can do things with your team and say that the things that they're doing you think are valuable, and actually that you want to spend time with them because they're an awesome team. Encourage dreams. So I'm going to go back to those one-on-ones that we had earlier. So that's kind of the meeting I used to find out from people, what do they really want to do? What are they excited about? What are they passionate about? Where do they want to change in their career? Everyone's got aspirations of what they want to do. And so through doing this, I found out that my tester kind of had fallen into testing, and that's what she was doing, but it wasn't the thing that excited her. And I was like, well, what does excite you? And she's like, well, some leadership stuff. And she was really she was the person who would like call the team on our conscience when somebody would say something a little bit negative, or maybe something that was disrespectful to one person, or we'd use language that wasn't particularly very nice to some groups, and she'd just have a nice way of telling us to be aware of it without making people feel bad. And I was like, and she's like, I really like the people stuff and the soft stuff and the leadership stuff, but I don't really know how to get there from being a tester. And we were doing kind of agile, and she was the notional Scrum Master. I wear the Scrum Master hat for 15 minutes at the stand-up, but I really am a team member. And I was like, well, I really believe that Scrum Masters are a full-time job. So why don't you try that for a bit? But we have to get the team's agreement on it. So had a session with the team, had a retrospective, and she brought up with the team, said, I want to try this for an experiment. I was there and I said, in my experience, it's a really good idea to try it for 3 sprints. And then, if it works, you can keep doing it. If it doesn't work, you can adjust, you can change it, do something, but do it for 6 weeks. But she was the only tester on the team. So if she's doing that for 6 weeks, the rest of you have to be okay to pick up testing. And they went, okay, we'll do that. The change in her engagement, excitement, absolutely everything about being at work was like night and day as soon as we did this. And the whole team could see it. She was suddenly came up with the most mind-blowing retrospective plans I've ever seen. We did awesome stuff. She was having one-on-ones with every team member that was so powerful. They were like, when are we having another one? That was so awesome. It came to the end of the 6 weeks and the team were like, well, we all want to make sure that she can keep doing this because she's just so much happier that we want that. And so everybody has this inside of them. Everybody has a thing that they want to be able to do, and they sometimes feel like they can't, they don't know how. Your job as a leader is to find a path for them to do that, because they will be so much more motivated and excited if what they're doing at work is taking them further on that journey. And you have the power to unlock that for them. I didn't need to get permission from anybody to do that. That was just our decision in the team. Okay, this is where the like dum-da-dum music starts. So I was in a very happy place. I was working with the best team I'd ever had. I was having a really fun job. I was a product manager in that job as well, so I was kind of the team's manager and a product manager. It was awesome. And then it was time to do the annual budgets. And what I started to notice is that we'd had all these conversations about the vision and the this and the strategy and what are we going to do and how we're going to change the face of the whole company and it's going to be awesome. And the conversation kept coming back to, and how much revenue can we get for that this year? I was like, well, we don't really know because there's a whole new area we're going to experiment in, and we don't know if anyone will buy this, and we don't even know what it's going to look like because we're going to explore and experiment and do it in a very kind of lean way. So no, I can't really give you a number of how much money it's going to make us, but I know it's the right decision. And so when I noticed about annual budgets, and this was a listed company, so I don't know if it's different in other companies, but the focus is on what will the figures look like at the end of this financial year. And that means that anything that does not impact those figures gets shortchanged. So anything that's going to have a time frame financially of more than a year, no focus on it. We're not going to do anything. So you end up with this short-term thinking the whole time. The other thing is, if you're just looking at this isolated picture, you start to look at things like, oh, well, if we do that, then that's going to cost us more, or this, or whatever. And it's this very short window on things. If you incentivize people on those numbers, it gets even worse. And so there is a book that I started reading when this was happening called Beyond Budgeting. I highly recommend it if you find yourself trapped in this. But I don't think they have to be evil, but I think they can be implemented in a way that really struggles to keep long-term objectives in view. So story starts, and we're starting to look at annual budgets. And it turns out that because we were going in a new direction, we weren't going to make any revenue. And so there was this concept that we can't afford to kind of keep the whole team. We're only going to make X amount of revenue, so we need to reduce our costs. And the question they asked me was, so who do you need? So we all know that people are like the most important asset that your company has. So yeah, people are an important asset, but teams of people that function well together are an even more important asset. So what they say about a high-functioning team, some of those great teams you've all been part of, the output of that team is greater than the sum of its parts. So if we have 5 individuals and they're a high-functioning team and they give us an output of 10, why would we want to go back to 5? And so this is something that was kind of contrary to me when you're looking at it from a cost basis. So you've got a team of 5 that costs X. Can't you achieve the same thing with 3? And I'm like, no, we don't have 5, we have 10. And as soon as you mess with it, it's not going to be 10. It's not even going to be 5. It's going to be like minus 10. So I don't think that mentality comes into the budget accounting mind frame. And that's kind of where this struggled. So to me, the core part of Agile and what we're trying to achieve is these units of teams that function cohesively. Teams are more resilient than individuals. They don't generally all get sick at the same time. So you always have somebody there. They have shared knowledge. They have multiple perspectives. Hopefully they have some diversity. They have a whole lot more skills than a single person can have. So if you have great units of those, why would you want to mess with them? So we presented this back and we said, well, we've got this great team. We don't really think that we should be splitting them up. We think maybe we can come up with something that can deliver some value for this year. And so they said, okay, great. You're a great team. You have been delivering fantastically for 6 months. Go away and spend some time and talk about it and think about it. Think about what it is that you'd like to do, how you might best work, how we can make this work. It's not really that urgent. You can take as much time as you need to discuss it. I think it was a week later, there was a meeting and it was like, we'll be starting a formal restructuring process on Monday. And I went, what happened to we've got as much time as we need to talk about it? And the problem with that is when you say one thing and you do something else, people are like, did you mean it? Were you leading me on? Did you just say what I wanted to hear? Did you change your mind? And all of those questions come up, and what ends up happening is you stop trusting it. So you stop trusting what people tell you because last time they told you a thing, that didn't actually happen. So why should you believe the next thing that they tell you? And so if you are going to make a promise, stick to it. But that doesn't mean you have to promise everything. If you don't know, it's okay to say you don't know. But rather say, we don't know what we're going to do, take some time and think about it, and we're going to figure it out and get back to you. My perspective of what happened, and I am completely aware that this is from my point of view, is that what happened is they gave us time to talk about it, and so we all talked about it, and nobody knew what was happening, and that was a perception that there was no one in control. Because I literally heard a message like, well, there are rumors. And I was like, that's good, because that means people are talking about it. And it's better that they talk about it now and are involved in the decision than there are rumors afterwards like, you know what happened to that person. But I think in this case, that made leadership really, really nervous, and so they took action immediately. And so it comes back to that vulnerability thing. You're willing to go, we don't actually know what the right answer is here. We want you to all discuss it and decide as a group what you think a good idea is. We'll come up with an idea in some time. Just because you don't know the answer does not mean that you're not in control. And so I think that might be what happened. Anyway, roll forward. We then went through an entire restructuring. Wait, you got words for it here. What's a restructure? Sorry, I recently moved from South Africa, and there we call it redundancy, and I try to get the words right. But we went through an entire restructuring process with the team. Went through like the whole official thing with HR and consultants and letters, and there's a whole formal process. And I hope you never have to go through a thing like that. But my lesson for it is if you ever do as a leader, you need to have empathy. So some of the things that, has anyone actually been through one of those process things? Okay. Did you get told your role was disestablished? Did anyone think that was a great thing and they would like it to happen again? So I don't know, I'm in my 40s. I've been really, really lucky in my career, apparently, because my best friend Sam's had it happen to her 3 times. This is the first time that I'd ever had a role disestablished. It doesn't matter what people tell you. Well, we're disestablishing a role because we'd really like you to go do this job over here and we think you'd be awesome at it. It doesn't matter. You tell me I'm disestablished, what I hear is you don't value me. And the other, there was a couple of examples of this where it was literally like there was just no empathy. So somebody was coming back from leave. The first day back from her leave was the day they called her into a meeting at 9 a.m. to tell her this news. So she got into the office and we grabbed her and took her into a meeting room and like, okay, so we know you've just come back from this awesome holiday overseas, but we need to give you some news before you go into this room and you get like completely sidelined. And so we gave her the news. And she came back to us after she'd been called into the meeting and she's like, if you hadn't done that, she would have resigned on the spot because she was so blindsided by this thing. And so when you're coming at this process as a leader and you're going, well, we just have to be efficient and get it done, and if we get it done on this day, you have to consider the people involved and have some empathy for what's happening. Nobody wants to come back from a 3-week holiday in Europe to this news within 5 minutes of walking into the office. Just there isn't a person who that's a good outcome for. The other thing is we had people whose roles were not officially touched, so they weren't considered affected. So they didn't have any meetings or consultation or anything. When you take half of a team and you rip them away, everybody is affected. In fact, not even people in the team, but people who this team worked with were affected. So again, it's about have empathy for people and understand that although you think you're making a business decision, what you're really doing is affecting people's lives. And so how can you do that in a way that you kind of respect that other human's going to have these emotions and that maybe there's a nicer way to do it. And I did get told a lot by HR that there's a process and you have to follow it and you have to use these rules. I still think you can do it with empathy. And probably the biggest lesson is that all that effort that we put into building trust, which takes so long and is really, really difficult, can be destroyed by a single act. Of the 11 people in my team, and the goal was not to lose anybody, the goal was just to move them to other parts of the company, there are only 4 people left to work at the company. And most of them are looking for other jobs. And that I know of 4 people outside of the team left as a direct result of it. So that's because if this happens to your colleague, you start to think it could happen to you. And so I've worked in other organizations where they've done things that break trust and they think, well, we're doing this in a small, isolated way to contain a problem. Be really, really, really conscious of what that's costing you. Mark and I were talking earlier about when you won't pay the $20 for coffee for your team to have coffee, and it seems like you're saving $20, you're actually breaking trust and saying, I don't think you're worth $20, or I think you're abusing privilege, or what is the real cost of that decision? And so the cost of breaking trust is going to hit you again and again and again, and we never cost that part of the decision. So think about these things that you're doing and what you're not seeing and what that's costing you. And so in processing all of this stuff, I started to think, what is it that team had that was so special? And I think I was reading some stuff by Mary Williams. She's a dev manager in London somewhere, CTO. And she's got a whole thing about belonging. And so the thing that great teams have is that people feel like they belong to them. Kind of like you belong to a family. And I think that's the thing. So all of you put your hands up earlier for you have worked with a great team. Did you feel like you belonged in that team? They accepted you for who you were? If you had a chance to work with that team again, would you? in a heartbeat. So this brings me back to the most powerful things we have are not individuals, they're teams. So every single person who was part of my team, we still meet for lunch about at least once a month. We have a Slack group that we talk on all the time. We set up our own Slack group. We're all checking out where everybody else is working because we're basically all just looking for the opportunity where we can all go and create our team again. And so if I go back to, if you create these great teams, you also need to protect these great teams because that is the unit. And the unit will actually survive despite your company. So how many of you who've worked on one of those great teams that don't work on that great team today, how many of you have actually worked with people from that team again? Yeah? So you go somewhere and when it's nice, you're like, hey buddy, this is really cool, you should come. When I worked in South Africa, there was literally this group of 4 testers that would move around and you just had to get one of them. And they were really, you just had to get one and keep them happy because all 4 would come later, sooner or later. And so people do that. People want to work with their friends and have a place that they belong. And so your job as a leader is to create that. Because if you can't create that in your organization, somebody else will. And they're going. So I think that's my outcome, is belonging is the most powerful thing that a team can have. And that's the most powerful thing you can create as a leader. I think that's all I have to say. That is all I have to say. Cool, thank you.